Shalom Aleichem, dearest friends. Good Chodesh, Chodesh Shvat. So thankful we have another opportunity to be together this Mishmar night, this Motzei Rosh Chodesh Shvat, Erev Shabbos Kodesh Va'era. I want to dedicate tonight to sponsor the Ilui Nishmas, Fega Bas Noach, and sending lots of love to that whole family. I want to sing a nigun we haven't sung in a while from Michal Shapiro. And it's such a deep, deep tefillah. I'm sure you agree with me, those of you that know it. Don't feel so far from your home, it's not such a long journey. The path is inside of you, it waits but don't wait too long. The mind's so far from the heart, they think and act as strangers. Make peace and be as one, love and serve the one King. Don't be afraid, His love surrounds you. Though you may feel alone, and within a soft voice calls you, return home. And on the way back home, the soul rejoices deeply. Creation sings in joy, she returns to harmony when light is revealed in those precious treasures. Then sorrow has no place, and joy abounds forever. Don't be afraid, His love surrounds you. Though you may feel alone, and within a soft voice calls you, return home. Don't be afraid, His love surrounds you. Though you may feel alone, and within a voice calls you, return home. I dum dum da da la da da la da la da 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 bum 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 Whoever's watching or listening right now, such a simple melody, inviting you to please join me. Bum 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 ba da lie da lie di da da lie da lie da lie da lie da da lie da lie di lie da lie da lie di 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 lie da lie da lie da lie oh yeah da lie da lie da la 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 oh yeah ba la bam bam la 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 oh yeah la 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 bum bum ay ay Okay, so thank you for the harmony. Thank you for the love. Thank you for the energy. Whenever we have these opportunities to learn, and I try not to make it too long because of we've already, more or less gotten a sense of how much hakshava, how much concentration can actually happen online. And these days there's kimat absolutely no face-to-face learning. So when you know that there's so much in your heart to share, like the whole time right now, I'm just davening, like let it just come out in a way that can just reach me. I think that I should feel close to what I want to share, and I hope that it opens up some someplace inside of you, going into the Parsha of the Shabbos, which is such a powerful, powerful, powerful Parsha. They all are. This Parsha is so beyond this world powerful. And I always find myself in this beautiful place of tension when we finish Parshat Shmot and go into Va'era. Because Moshe Rabbeinu tells Hashem things that each of us have told God the same things at a certain point in our life, when we began a certain mission that we felt very, very much committed to, and that we actually felt this was the Ratzon of God, this was the will of Hashem. And it's not working out the way that we assumed it would. In Moshe Rabbeinu's case, it wasn't working out the way that, he was clearly directed by God as to how it would work. It just got worse. So everyone knows the teaching from Reb Nachman that when a person first goes into Avodas Hashem, one of the signs that you know that it's for real is if it's not working. One of the clearest signs that if you're looking for a sign, one of the clearest signs is that it's for real is, this is I definitely am not in control over here. I got to do my lot, I got to do my ishtadlus, but this is not, I'm not running the show. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu learns pretty much, straight on the beginning of it. Moshe Rabbeinu ends by telling Hashem, Lama hare osa la'am hazeh. Why are you making it so hard on this people? And then Parshat Shmot ends by basically HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying, okay, I'm going to show you now what it's all about. But we don't really know at the end of last Parsha how God took Moshe Rabbeinu's complaints. We just know that Hashem says, okay, now I'm going to show you what it's all about. You've touched on something that you can't take back, Moshe Rabbeinu. But let's go. And then the Parsha ends, right? And then the Parsha Va'era begins with what I believe is one of the most powerful, powerful conversations that us human beings were ever exposed to. Literally, if we took line from line what the Parsha is telling us about the words that were exchanged between, not really exchanged, but really Hashem telling over to Moshe Rabbeinu in the beginning of Va'era, I'm telling you, friends, you and I would find ourselves, it would be kind of freaky that you think that someone went into your heart and wrote down what they saw and then put it in the Parsha. But some of the words that are used, and I'm trying to focus on really one specific phrase, is the phrase where Hashem kind of tells Moshe Rabbeinu, look, I'm running the show, you'll never fully understand it, but there's one thing that I want it to be clear to you. Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, you think that I don't hear you. You think I don't hear the crying. And the way that Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu that he heard us crying is very interesting. He doesn't say, Ani shamati et na'akat b'nei Yisrael asher mitzrayim avidim otam. Doesn't say, I heard that Yidlach were in pain. It says, V'gam ani shamati, and also I heard. V'gam ani shamati. I also happened to hear that Am Yisrael were in pain and they were crying to me. So, this coming few weeks, it's always, the last few years is always very, it's, for Baruch Hashem, for many years been very personal. It's my wife's birthday coming up, and a few years ago, it also, around this time, one of the greatest influences in my life passed away. That was the singer Meir Banai, who you've heard me mention his name quite a lot. And whenever around his Yortzeit time, I listen a bit more to his screaming. And this, I don't have it on me, but the sefer that we put out on Reb Shlomo on Shmot was dedicated in his memory, Leilui Nishmato. And I wrote in there in the beginning that he taught us how to scream. He taught us how to scream to Hashem. He was known to be one that didn't even have to try hard to belt it out, to yell it, to scream it. So let's go shlav by shlav over here. We're going to get back at the end to try to understand what it means, v'gam ani shamati et na'akad b'nei Yisrael. The word v'gam, and also. And here I want us to open our hearts and pay attention to what happens to us right before we say the silent prayer. Right before we daven tfilat amidah, we say something very interesting in Shachris, right? Baruch atah Hashem Ga'al Yisrael. And at night, we know Shomer Amo Yisrael Ad, but I want to talk about the morning for a second. Everyone knows that place of Shmona Esrei is just like Rabbi Nachman. I saw last week, Rabbi Yitzchak Bender was saying that Rabbi Nachman said that every person has to have a certain room for his bodhidus, a special room for his bodhidus. And the Hasidim were wondering, Rabbi, we're so broke, we barely have rooms to sleep or eat in. I have to have another room, a special room, just for his bodhidus. So what it meant was like, no, you have to have up here, or when you go into a certain zone, a special room that is just to be misboded. And especially when you have the privilege of praying with the talis, then that becomes the room of his bodhidus, right? So that's this zone that a yid enters into in Shmona Esrei is his own room. It's his own world. And when we're lucky enough, no one can come in there. But the word that precedes the last word before we start going into our room of his bodhidus, the last two words, the bracha, really explains to us what we are experiencing. Baruch atah Hashem Ga'al Yisrael. You've redeemed us, right? In the past. Ga'al Yisrael. What's the redemption? The redemption is that I feel so close to Hashem. I feel close enough to cry to him in his presence, in my presence. Which makes davening, it takes davening to a completely different world. And we will speak this year much more about this when we get to Parashat Va'etchanan. But for now, this is a teaching we learned in Simchat Shlomo many years ago. Part of this teaching was explaining how that really is the greatest miracle. It's one thing to do a miracle like you know, the greatest miracles of that we're witnessing this Shabbos, 7 miracles. That's one thing, right? But over here, what we're seeing is something that I think is on today's level, oxygen. My first connection to God, my first connection to Hashem, is not I do what you say. My first connection to Hashem is I sense that you listen to me. Baruch atah Hashem Gal Yisrael. And then what do? Hashem svasai tiftach v'fi yagid tilotecha. There's nothing higher than that. That's the greatest redemption there is, that I know that I can pray and Hashem hears me. There's no greater ke'ula in the world. Like there could be anything. God can do anything for us, but then nothing would come close to that sense of, I know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is hearing me right now. And I want us to think about this for a second. Sometimes I don't even know what I want. I don't even know what I want to ask from God. And the classic question you always get is, what happens when you show up to His Bodhidus and nothing's coming out? You're under the impression that in order for things to be heard, I need to know what I'm saying. But when it comes to being heard by the Ribono Shel Olam, it's basically a krechts, vaye'anchu, anacha. It's a kvetch, it's a cry, and you could feel heard even without saying anything. You could feel like you're being heard without specifying what hurts you, why it hurts you. Like when little children are crying, and it happens so often. And Baruch Hashem, I saw this Torah from Reb Shlomo many years ago, right as I was becoming an Abba, and it's played a very big role in our parenting. Very, very, very big role. Where one of the children will cry, and instead of saying, well, what is it? What do you want? before you ask what's wrong, make sure that they feel heard. What's wrong? Maybe something's wrong. Maybe there is meaning something to fix, or maybe there isn't something to fix. זה לא קשור, זה לא חשוב. Shamati, I hear this. I'm with you, and so often, it's not just with kids. You know, mamish, like this week, someone called me. They said they have to speak to me about something. Halfway through the conversation, I realized that there was nothing specific to speak about. But the need of the person to be redeemed out of their own Mitzrayim was just that they felt that they're being heard. And for us, it was just a privilege to be on the other end. But Geula is, are you close enough to someone to cry? Are you close enough to be able to pour it out in front of someone else? And somehow, we saw in Parashat Shmot that the second that the old Paro dies, there was an opening. There was a sense of Yidden felt close enough to cry. Baruch atah Hashem Ga'al Yisrael, Hashem Svatai Tiftach, Ufi Yagid Tilatech. And they start speaking, and they start crying, and nothing can stop that. That's the one, it says about that, Vayeda Elokim, God knew where we were at, so to speak, and what we were experiencing, and what we really wanted and needed just by kvetching, not even by wording anything out. And I hate to say it, but people are beginning to sound like broken records. Every conversation that I'm having with people today starts off, continues, and ends with, wow, such crazy times. There's got to be more than just saying such crazy times, because this is becoming the norm. So, soon we'll be like, hey, how's it going? Yeah, this is just normal. There's got to be something else that's coming out. The na'aka, this is crazy. My wife and I and the kids drove to the gas station today. It was like going to get them an afikoman present. Something so wild is taking place. Have we felt closer to cry out to Hashem? Or do we feel like we need to know exactly what we want to tell Him? And this is what the Geula of Mitzrayim taught us, and this is what the Geula of today is teaching us as well. That the greatest redemption I can experience is realizing how precious it is to be close enough to God, to feel close enough, or even to feel far enough, but to feel real enough, and that the closeness is something so real that I could start to tell Hashem, I'm in such pain, I don't even know I don't know where bread is coming from next week, I don't know where we're going. And then by the time that I finish that krechts, even if it doesn't have words, oh, wow, redemption is what I just experienced. Redemption is what I just experienced. And it's the same between people, redemptive relationships. And that's really the nakuda that I wanted to bring up tonight. This is a very, very important thing that I wanted to bring up, and it's really a story from the Beis Medrash of the Chasam Sofer of the Beis Medrash of Pressburg. This is just a wonderful story that I think many of you have heard before, but when I saw it, I realized this is the heart, this is the basar of what I wanted to give over tonight. So there was a great merchant from the town of Pressburg, goes into the Chasam Sofer, and he starts pouring out his heart and soul to him, saying that he got into some serious financial debt. He got into financial problems, and he came to get the bracha of the Rav, and also the Eitzah to see what I should do. So listen to the Chasam Sofer's response to him. He says to him, I heard that your brother, he has a very big family. He's really suffering tremendously with horrible financial situation as well, and all his kids. He has a big family, a lot of kids. They've barely been able to eat, and I heard that you haven't helped him at all this whole period. So this merchant turns to the Chasam Sofer. He says, I don't understand, Rabbi. I just shared with you. I just told you that My matzav lately is so, is so shvach. How could I support others? So the Chassan Sofer goes to our parsha, and he says, you want to understand why God says, Vegam ani shamati et nakat bnei Yisrael, that I also heard the crying of Am Yisrael? Listen to this. The Chassan Sofer says that towards the redemption of Egypt, so God says, Vegam ani shamati et nakat bnei Yisrael. So why does the Torah use the word Vegam? So he says that when Yidden were in such pain, and they had all the legitimate reasons to kvetch over their situation because of how bad and how unbearable the situation was being in Egyptian slavery, each and every one of them also heard the pain. They noticed their neighbors and their brothers and their sisters' pain as well. So Vegam ani shamati, the Rebbeinu Shalom says, I heard their cry, but I noticed, I also heard that within their cry was also the cry of how could you do it how could it be so bad for them as well? Says the Chasam Sofer, because they were able to still be attuned to that very harsh reality of what someone else was going through. That is the voice that reached heaven and which began this process of a world of wonders, of leaving Mitzrayim, going to Har Sinai, eventually coming to Eretz Yisrael, paving the path for you and I to figure this out and bring the team home. So this Vegam, like there's nothing has changed today. We're in deep. Each of us in our own lives are wondering what's happening with the chinuch of my children, what's happening with my parnasa, and it's all those are very legitimate inyanim. But if we look into the Torah to understand how Geula took place back then, as a reference to what Be'ezrat Hashem it'll be like around now, so the Torah is clearly telling us, V'gam ani shamati, that the Rebbeinu Shalom says, when the Yidden were crying, I could sense that they were also carrying within themselves the other person's pain. Which helps us understand one more level, friends. Open your hearts and we'll sing one more nigun after this. When Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu why there's going to be, what's the point of redemption, or what's going to be one of the results of redemption, it says, "V'yedu Mitzrayim ki ani Hashem." It says that Egypt will know that I'm God. So I learned this morning with one of my chavrut, with my dear chavrusa Yossi, we were learning that from the Slonim, it doesn't say V'yedu. I think it's a Torah from the Degel Machaneh Ephraim, actually. We quoted the Degel Machaneh Ephraim. It doesn't say that Egyptians will know, V'yedu Mitzrayim ki ani Hashem. It says V'yedu Mitzrayim, that this concept called Mitzrayim will know that I am God. That's what I'm coming down to the world to do. Why? Mitzrayim represents Ervat Haaretz. The Mitzrayim represents every type of abomination that can come from materialistic problems. The scariest thing is when we live in a world that we either hear or don't hear someone else's cry, and if we hear it and it does nothing to us, that's Mitzrayim. If we don't hear it at all, it's also Mitzrayim. But Hashem saw that Yidden were getting in tune with Geula because what? I heard, V'gam ani shamati et nakat bnei Yisrael, the Mitzrayim that may have been the function of Egypt, which may have played a role in Yiddelach's lives by living in Egypt and being contaminated by the impurity of the land, which resulted in me not being able to really hear what someone else was going through. Rebbeinu Shalom told Moshe Rabbeinu, the Yidden got it. V'yedu Mitzrayim ki ani Hashem. I could sense that the culture and the hashpa'ah, the influence that was coming on to Am Yisrael from Egyptian culture for all those years, that somehow when they started crying, the tears burst ranting because they felt close enough to each other to cry in front of each other. Friends, I'm saying in different minyanim, street minyanim, it's who's crying in front of you? Who are you crying in front of? When we go back to shul, there'll have to be tissues in every single seat. Alavai. And they'll be used. Alavai. They will be close enough. You know, I was once vacationing with the family in some yeshuv up north, way up north, close to the Syrian border. And I had a friend of mine that lives there. He's a Rav. And I always I was trying to understand why he lives in this yeshuv. It seemed like a pretty straight place, not really, and he's really deep and open and expressive. And when he came to Minyan, when I was there, every few minutes he would go like this, oh, and continue davening. And that was the most beautiful oy I ever heard, but I was kind of like, oh my God, they probably think he's crazy. And after davening, I noticed that the people that probably never give a krechts like that went up to him and spoke to him, and they felt close. He felt close enough to cry, to go like that in their presence, even if that's not what they're doing. But to give oh my gosh, to be close enough to cry in front of someone is geula. I'll end off with this. I once was davening in a minyan in Nachlaot, a shachris. And a bunch of my friends were davening there. One morning, Yonatan Razel was also davening there. And the Chazan, it was amazing. The Chazan was doing Chazer Sashatz, and he starts to say, Shema Keleinu Hashem Elokeinu, Ov Rachman Chus V'Racham Aleinu, V'Kabel V'Rachman Rotzen Es Tfiloseinu, Kikel Shemeat Tfilos V'Sach Nemata. It was a Monday morning in the middle. I think it was around like maybe a bit after now. It was like, it wasn't Rosh Hashanah, it wasn't Elul. He starts crying. And the beautiful thing about it is that people weren't freaked out besides me, because I wasn't used to that minyan. Yonatan looks at me, he says, yeah, that happens here sometimes. Who knows if that chazan was bringing up with him everyone's collective pain and therefore crying out. But whatever it is, he felt close enough to cry, and that alone was redemption. Alavai, we should also somehow, some way, learn the Parsha this year, take in the signs just a tad deeper, so that we can also know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu shomat na'akat Amo Yisrael today as well. Let's sing that nigun one more time. Good Shabbos. Thank you, everyone. Good Shabbos, good Shabbos.